Interesting question. So I think personally, it's great that this platform and having the internet has helped so many women come together and find each other and have a space where they can talk to each other. There are these communities, which I'm so grateful for, because I think growing up, I didn't have that, which a lot of young women have. Like they have that now. But in terms of that helping men grow up, or little boys grow up to a generation where they consider, I don't know, women to be more equal. Um, I think that having just internet and seeing, like, following women that you may agree with or their way of life isn't really enough. I don't think that is enough for men to see women as equal, because we need to make sure that more women are independent financially and they make enough money, because I think men for a long period don't actually consider women as equal, because women don't end up being financially independent. Like they're very dependent on their partners or their fathers. And or in workspaces, after, this is something that I was talking to my partner about as well. And after women get married or have children, like they're so isolated from society that I think it's a different kind of silencing, where we don't see stories of women in their 40s, 50s, 60s. We don't hear about what they're doing. It's always still 30s, and then they get married and have children and become mothers. They're not entrepreneurs, they're not business women. And I think that needs to change. I think we really have to focus on making sure that women aren't dependent in order for men to see them as equals. I think feeling threatened, firstly, is a very natural emotion that people feel. Human beings end up feeling very threatened because something that belonged to you is probably possibly being taken away. And for generations, men have just had control over women's bodies. Like they've been selling our bodies, they've been using it as a product, we've been objectified. I think the fact that I use certain photos or I talk about certain things when it comes to me having rights over my body and other women having freedom to feel the same thing is very confronting to people, because especially men, because they now lose that right over my body to objectify it, because it's not really objectification if I'm doing it. And I think that's scary for a lot of people, especially men who are not really raised to feel threat. They don't take threat in a very positive way. It's like a negative emotion. And that happening over generation, and now women suddenly wanting to take so much more space, wanting to make decisions over their own bodies, is, I think that really triggers people. Like people are really scared of that. And the conversation can only change if we keep having it. I feel like we're also silencing women through social media, like platforms like Instagram, which are supposed to exist so that you can have a space and a voice. But at the end of the day, women are penalized for saying the things that they want to say, because we get shadow banned, or you're not seen as much, or like there's so many restrictions. So we forget that they're still run by the same people that don't want you to behave a certain way. It's a reflection of society.
Absolutely.
My mom was very, very particular about making sure that me and my brother are raised with the same kind of upbringing. We were allowed to do the same things. And I see him around all the other men that I know. And I think he's a lot more vulnerable, because he was raised solely by my mother, and she's vulnerable, and we communicate a lot as a family. And I think the role of like a child growing up, even though there's so much pressure on women as mothers to do it, I think it's important for fathers to step in as well and have that same vulnerability, because regardless of what your mother teaches you, I think at the end of the day you do relate. Like I feel like I step into these shoes as a woman that I see women around me doing, and I relate to that far more than I relate to what men do, what we show men doing in social media and like movies and cinema. So I think in that sense, fathers, because that question was, what can fathers do? And I think fathers just need to be more part of a child's upbringing, where there's vulnerability and connections and conversations more than just, I don't know, more than paying the bills. And I think that really needs to change so that men can grow up and feel like they can also behave the same way.
Sure. I mean, but what are the tips, Najiba and Saloni? I mean, what is it that men can do? What can you think of at the tip of your hands? Do you want to tell something to men?
I think for me, number one would be like communicating with your children, because I have a lot of friends who don't have good relationships with their fathers. Their fathers will shower them with financial help, but they can't really communicate with them. They can't talk to them about how their day was, or they're not allowed to cry, or there's not a lot of empathy. Like most men seem to not understand empathy, they get sympathy. So I think that would, like, vulnerability would be a really important thing for me. I can take this. Like, I genuinely, because I know it felt scary before I spoke up as well, when the whole Me Too thing was happening. And I think one of the biggest issues is you don't want to bite the hand that feeds you. Like, being independent, being financially independent is rebellious enough for women right now. Like, this is the first time that so many of us have the opportunity to not have children, to not get married, to have a job and make those choices. So, on top of that, speaking about abuse, especially within the industry or your workspace, there is a lot of shame involved. And you don't end up getting as much work as you would otherwise if you stay silent. So, I think in order to protect that work, because we haven't been that allowed to work for that many generations. And I think for me personally, it felt like just, I mean, I did do it in the end, but it just felt like having a job is rebelling enough. And I think so many women that I speak to choose to just be financially independent instead of trying to deal with the abuse that they're going through.